What's up, guys? Hey guys, so I'm having issues with the bot. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get it running. It keeps giving me errors trying to start it, so yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to use the bot today, actually, guys. But I don't want to delay because of that. We need to get going. We have a lot to talk about today, that we need to try to cover in 2 hours. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and get. I can't restart it, dude. What do you mean restart it? I can't restart it. It's not started. It keeps giving me an error saying something's failing to start. Please, it's already open, but it's not already open because I never opened it to begin with. So yeah, we're kind of screwed there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get Preston in here, guys. Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and hey, what's up, Preston?
Hey man, how's it going this morning?
It's going, dude. It's going.
Yeah. But
You excited? Excited for week 2?
Yeah, kinda. Not with
Kinda.
the injuries to the Patriots, but I'll be alright.
All right, guys. So we're gonna go ahead and open up, or we're gonna go ahead and start with the news and updates for this week. Preston, I don't know if you wanted to start or.
Yeah. Well, in news, David Johnson will be out 2 to 3 months with wrist surgery, which sucks for my fantasy team since I have him on there. And they've told me that I should drop him because he won't be back till Christmas. That's the earliest they're saying he's coming back is Christmas.
Yeah, it's brutal. Definitely something to consider if you're a David Johnson owner. And I'm sorry about your first round pick going down the toilet.
It's alright. It happens. Just ask Jamarcus Russell.
All right. The second thing we had to so Deshaun Watson, of course, made his first career start as a Houston Texan this earlier this I guess last week, if you will, against the Bengals in week 2 over Tom Savage.
Yeah. He played pretty well. He played pretty well for a rookie. You can't expect that much out of a rookie in his first game.
Right.
But what surprised me was the Bengals offense. So it wasn't Deshaun Watson, it was the Bengals offense in that game, which we'll get to later.
Yep.
All right. The next news is Texans linebacker Brian Cushing suspended 10 games for second drug violation. But now there's an interesting story. I don't know if you might have read it on, I think it was on ESPN, that one of his former teammates said he's a big steroid user. Like the NFL is just catching on to him, but he's been using steroids his whole career.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
All right. And then wow, we have a lot of Texans news today, I guess. So then we have Houston placed Fedorowicz on injured reserve. So is he supposed to? Do you know if he's supposed to be coming back this season? Is it injured reserve ready to coming back, or is it for the season?
I think it's for the season.
Damn. Well, Mike, if you're here, you gotta go ahead and drop him.
Yeah. Yep. And Tampa and Jacksonville are going to play their home games today. So they looked at all the damage and they said that it looks pretty good and that Tampa and Jacksonville could play at home this week.
Cool. You want to take? You could probably take the next one since that's.
Yeah. Hightower, Amendola out for New England versus Saints. I'm going to get more into this later once it's preview time because there's a lot of thoughts that I have in my head right now about the New England Saints game.
Hey, thank you, Gabe, for the timeout, dude. Yeah, sorry, guys. Baker Bot's not going to be working today. Something's weird with it right now.
Do you need me in chat, or do you have enough mods in there?
No, Gabe's got it.
Okay.
All right. See, last 2 items. So we've got so Bears wide receiver Kevin White was placed on a season-ending injured reserve list. This is the third time in his third season that he's been placed on injured reserve.
Sounds like he's
So
Sam Bradford.
literally, he's played no full season since he's been drafted by the Bears.
Yeah, sounds like he's the new Sam Bradford.
Something like that. I mean, Sam Bradford at least had at least a couple healthy seasons. I mean, he's had Well, that's that's something actually I'm going to talk about today too. But yeah, he's at least had some healthy seasons.
Yeah,
This guy's had zero.
yeah, and I guess I'll go ahead and take the last one.
Yeah.
Brissett to make first career start as an Indianapolis Colt after being traded by New England. I actually want to see how he plays not in Bill Belichick's offense. And somebody else's offense. So.
Yeah, after last week's performance by Tolzien, man, they definitely have to figure something out because until Luck comes back, even then, even then that may not be enough. They may not be enough for the Colts, but Tolzien just he had a terrible game.
Yep. Pretty bad.
I think he had negative 10 fantasy points or something like that. So I think he was probably one of the worst fantasy players of the week.
Yeah. And the Rams had 56 points on defense? Freaking outrageous, man.
Yeah. Right. Hey, what's up, Cole?
All right, guys,
How's it
we're
going,
gonna
dude?
roll into our one recap. Actually, before we do that, Becker,
Yeah.
I know we might not have time for it, but afterwards, can we talk about the fight last night? Because that thing is still on my head. Like, that should not have been a draw. Like,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have some time left.
that fight, man. Wow. But now we're rolling into our week one recap, and we're gonna start with the Steelers at Browns, and Becker's gonna start it off, and I'll come in.
All right, so I'm gonna So I have plenty of bullet points for this game, including stat lines for anyone who's interested. So first things first, Shazier, Gay, and Wilcox were all actually fined about $25K for the hits that they I guess their unsportsmanlike conduct hits that they did against the Browns. So each one of those guys were actually fined, which was good because they basically had some dirty hits going on in that game, especially Shazier and Gay. Ben was not fined or flagged for holding I think it was Emmanuel Ogbah on his interception throw to the Browns. So I think that's maybe something to be debated potentially in the offseason, but I think one of the big points that to be made there is the fact that QBs are protected from defenders by going after their legs and stuff like that. And I know Ben wasn't necessarily trying to chop block the guy or anything like that, but Ben did dive at his legs and he was grabbing onto his ankle. And so if anything, there should have been a holding call or something like that. I mean, it wasn't like he was trying to block him or anything like that. Also, Ben flopped on that play, which, I mean, I know they don't have calls for that in the NFL, but he acted like he got destroyed by Ogbah, even though Ogbah tapped him in the chest, and then he went flying backwards.
I would make a side comment, but I'm gonna leave that alone.
Yeah. All right, so so Ben had an okay game. He had 263 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, an interception. He was sacked 1 time. Le'Veon Bell was held to 32 rushing yards overall. Jesse James had 2 touchdowns. But basically the end result there was the fact that the Browns did exactly what they executed their exact game plan, which was keep everything in front of you. You know, there was a couple plays that Pittsburgh made that were big, but that was mainly because of poor tackling in some of those cases. And in one case, one of those balls happened to be tipped to Antonio Brown. So if a better play was made, then it would have been, obviously the game could have gone different. But Overall, the Browns' defensive game plan was executed to almost perfection. They kept everything in front of them. That's why the tight end was the only guy to get 2 touchdowns. Pittsburgh wide receivers had 0 touchdowns. Their halfbacks had 0 touchdowns. So the Browns defense played very effective last week. Kaiser's NFL debut. This was Kaiser's NFL debut and his debut with the Browns. He had an okay game with 222 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. One of those was rushing, so he had his first NFL rushing touchdown and his first NFL passing touchdown. He threw 1 interception. He had 0 fumbles, and the huge negative stat line against him was that he was sacked 7 times. That's not necessarily, of course, we frown upon that as with him being a rookie, but he is also a rookie. So at least he didn't turn the ball over more. So that was, again, 7 sacks isn't what you want to see, but it could have been worse. So Isaiah Crowell was held to 33 rushing yards. So the run game did not get going for Cleveland. So it was all purely on Kaiser. And, given that, Kaiser, honestly did really well. Regardless of his interception and his 7 sacks, Kaiser led an 8-play, 73-yard drive towards the end of the game. And then they also converted on the 2 points, and that's what allowed that game to end up being so close. The ultimate deciding factor of that game, or where the game slipped away from the Browns, was that essentially the one pass play to Antonio Brown. So there was some controversy there, which I know Browns fans were even a little irritated about, and I think probably other people were questioning. So, and the play I'm referring to was when they had I don't know, I think it was like a 30-yard pass play to Antonio Brown where he caught it and he kind of rolled over, and then at the end of the play, the ball slipped out of his hands, and the refs called it. They considered it a completed pass. Before the commercial timeout, Hugh Jackson had actually taken a timeout, and so what he had explained on the podium post-game was that when he told the ref ahead of time that after this play, presumably if they actually convert, that he wanted a timeout. So as soon as the play was made and he was ruled complete, the ref called the timeout on Hugh Jackson's behalf. But then when Hugh Jackson saw the replay, he decided to challenge it, and because of the fact they lost the challenge, that's why they lost those 2 consecutive timeouts. So it was very unfortunate. It was something that he said he would definitely learn from and try not to make the same mistake, but at the same time, he had to throw the flag. I mean, it was a game-deciding play, and you only would have had 1 timeout anyways. So it's not like it would have been enough to help you win the game by keeping 1 timeout, so he had no choice other than to throw the flag.
But to me,
so
it
that's
like it was completed. So I mean, there's different sides to it. Like the NFL needs to tell us the real rule of a completed catch. Like one play could be a completed catch, the next play is not a completed catch. They need to
Well, they did ask. The media did ask Hugh Jackson. They said, "Do you know at all what a completed catch is?" And he just kind of laughed and said, whatever they call on the field." He still said after the game, he's like, "I still don't believe that was a completed catch," because I think he felt like, and I kind of understand where he's coming from. They had the same thing against with OSU last week, if anyone recalls, where the defender was the one who helped push the ball out after he had already maintained possession, and then defender came through with a second action afterwards and it kicked the ball out or pushed the ball out. Whereas in this case, the defender really had no bearing on the play. He was rolling through the play, and the ball kind of was in underneath his stomach, and then kind of slipped out at the very end where he pushed. They claimed that he was trying to get up, but he wasn't actually trying to get up at that point. So I felt like it could have gone either way, but obviously they sided with the ruling on the field in that particular case.
Yeah. All right, you ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
All right, next up is Arizona and Detroit. It was a good day for Matthew Stafford. He completed 29 of 41 for 292 yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 pick. He was only sacked once.
And keep in mind that pick was the first play of their first possession of the game where he threw a pick 6.
Yep. The rushing didn't do very well. I mean, they didn't even have 100 yards total rushing. I don't think. Like it was
For Detroit?
yeah, they didn't have 100 yards total rushing. Um, in receiving, Golden Tate had 10 for 107. Um, let's see how the defense did. The defense had three picks, and one sack, and they forced a few fumbles. On Arizona's side of the ball, of course, Carson Palmer was 27 of 48 for 268 yards, one touchdown and three picks. He got sacked once. What hurt them the most is when David Johnson went out. The offense could not get rolling after Johnson left the game. He had 11 attempts for 23 yards before he got injured. And receiving, Fitzgerald and Duke Johnson, I guess it's Duke Johnson, led the receiving. But other than that, it wasn't that. Other than that, to me, it wasn't that good of a game. It was like more. Once David Johnson went out, it was like complete domination by the Detroit Lions. And as a team, let's see. As a team, total net yards, Arizona had 308 and Detroit had 367.
Okay.
Yep.
So Luke mentioned actually about the previous game. So he was referring to, I believe, the 7 sacks against Kaiser, and he mentioned that's not Kaiser's fault. Where's the line? So to kind of address that question, Deshaun Kaiser even said himself, which is again what gives people like me and people in Cleveland the hope that they desperately need for this team, is the fact that he said, look, my internal clock's got to be faster. I've got to speed that up. So he basically took the blame for probably the majority of those sacks. I mean, there were certain cases where, yeah, one was a completely blown block by Crowell. He took the wrong guy, and they double-teamed one dude, and a linebacker came straight in. So, I mean, you'll have plays like that. I mean, that happens in every game, right? You'll have that at least once or twice in every game in the NFL. But, you know, Kaiser just needed to get the ball out earlier. And he even said, like, he saw plays that he could have made, but, you know, he held it too long. It was maybe looking for something more, and so it was on him. So he's gotta wind up and release a lot faster than he has been. So, you know, and he's gonna learn from it. So that's good. All right, ready for the next one? Falcons, Bears. Yeah. All right, so this one, so go with the stat line first. So Matt Ryan had an okay game, which is kind of weird, but I mean, considering the stats, I still consider it okay. So Matt Ryan had an okay game. He had 321 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, no fumbles, and he was only sacked twice. So it's not a terrible game for him. Julio Jones ended the game with only 66 yards, but he had no touchdowns. There were no really big plays in this game for him and Matt Ryan. So Devonta Freeman was held in check to only 37 yards rushing, but he did get 1 touchdown. So that certainly, you know, helped if you had him in fantasy at least a little bit. I think he had a couple catches out of the backfield as well, but nothing major. And then on the Chicago side of the ball, Mike Glennon, he had a decent game. He had 213 yards, 1 touchdown pass, no interceptions, no fumbles, and he was sacked 4 times. Ultimately, this game kind of came down to it was more of a back and forth defense. I mean, there was a lot of field goals, but you know, Atlanta, and plus it's the first game of the season, so I can see how, you know, teams may be a little rusty, but it'll just be interesting to see how the Falcons move forward from this, because I was expecting a higher production game from the Falcons, but so to me they kind of let me down, but we'll see. This week will be test number 2, I think, against a formidable opponent in the Packers.
All right, so we ready for the next one?
Yep.
All right. The next up is Seattle and Green Bay. It was a pretty defensive game. I mean, it came down to defense. Russell Wilson didn't have that great of a game. He went 14 for 27 for 158 yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions, but he got sacked 3 times. But I felt like he got sacked more because of the way Green Bay's defense played in game 1.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Russell Wilson fumbled, and that was critical in that game, that fumble he had. Because that actually that's when Green Bay really started getting back in the game. Because it was 3-0 Seattle at that time. And that's when Green Bay scored the touchdown, and that's when they started getting the ball rolling.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers, he went 28 of 42 for 311 yards, a touchdown, interception. He was sacked 4 times. Ty Montgomery did pretty well. He had 19 rushes for 54 yards and a touchdown. On the receiving end, Cobb had the best game with 9 receptions for 85 yards, and he had 66 yards after the catch. Let's see, anything else? Defensively, not much going on there. There was a couple fumbles by the offense. Rodgers fumbled once.
Yeah.
But he got it back. It was a pretty solid defensive game from my standpoint. Did you want to say anything about the game, Becker?
Yeah. So that was Martellus Bennett's debut with Green Bay. So his first game with them, and I saw towards the end of the game that he came pretty close to almost costing them. I think their opportunity to actually close the game. He ended up with a personal foul, unsportsmanlike conduct, when one of the Seahawks players. It didn't seem like it was really an egregious tackle or attempt to take down Aaron Rodgers. Like Aaron Rodgers slid or something, the guy kind of fell on him, and Bennett got pissed off and ran over there and took the guy and shoved him off of Aaron Rodgers. And it's like, so he got unsportsmanlike conduct that could have, put their win in jeopardy. But towards the end of the game, Martellus Bennett actually ended up catching one of the I think somewhat medium passes from Aaron Rodgers that end up helping them seal the game. So while he almost helped cost them the game, he was also very beneficial in helping them seal that game as well. So
next game is Philadelphia and Washington. You want to start this one, Baker, since I started the last one?
Sure. All right, so let's see. So the points I had, so Eagles had 2 guys debuting first time with this team. You had Alshon Jeffrey, who came over from the Bears, and then you had LeGarrette Blount, who came over from the Patriots. Both of these guys actually didn't really have big games. Alshon Jeffrey only ended up with 3 receptions for 38 yards. He had 0 touchdowns. Blount, he had 1 receiving touchdown on a 1-yard pass reception. He did have 46 yards rushing though, but still like nothing like crazy. I mean, if you have him in fantasy, then at least he got you that 1 rushing touchdown and the one if you have PPR, then he got you that 1 reception. But other than that, like it seemed like it was pretty dismal to me for some guy, the guy who's, I think in theory supposed to be their workhorse back. Carson Wentz he actually had an okay game. He had 307 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, but he had 0 fumbles and he was sacked twice. And then you had Nelson Aguilar for the Eagles. He had the big play for them. He had a 58-yard touchdown reception.
You going to cover the Redskins side?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Well, on the Redskins side, Cousins went 23 for 40 with 240 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was sacked 4 times. His rating wasn't that well at all. He had a 72.9 rating.
He had a terrible game. That was my only. He had a terrible game. Kirk Cousins had a terrible game.
But he was the top rusher of the team with 30 yards on 4 attempts. And Terrell Pryor, a former Cleveland Brown, he has 6 receptions for 66 yards.
Right.
His long was 28, so pretty much all that went into 1 reception.
Right.
Yeah. And on defense, they had 1 interception. Let me see. How many sacks did take? 2, I think.
Yeah, once had forced. He was sacked twice. Cousins was sacked 4 times.
Yeah. Cousins fumbled twice and lost it twice. Jamison Crowder had a fumble, that's why I kicked him off my fantasy team this week. Like, Crowder did not play the way I thought he would. Other than that, it was a shitty game for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. Yeah. My big thing is that, I felt like Kirk Cousins had a bad game, and this to me is one of the reasons why I feel like the Redskins have signed him to have franchise tagged his ass twice because you're supposed to be the lead guy of the team, and like he almost I think he almost pretty much single-handedly cost them the game. So Eagles. So the Redskins offense produced only 1 touchdown in this game. So, you look at the score overall, but the Redskins offense only produced 1 touchdown in this game, and the other touchdown that they got was a pick 6 by their defense. The Eagles were up 22-17 with 1:30 left in the game, and the game was decided by I guess it's still considered potentially a controversial Kirk Cousins fumble. So there was some debate over whether or not his arm was actually moving forward when the ball came out. But either way, they did rule it as a fumble, and Philadelphia had picked that fumble up and returned it for a touchdown. So they were, the Eagles or Redskins could have had a chance to come back and win that game, but that one play was enough to seal the game for the Eagles. And like I said, Kirk Cousins had an awful game. Awful game.
Did you think it was a complete pass? Because that's what I thought. I thought it was a complete pass because his arm was going forward, didn't it?
I mean, it seemed like it was enough to be considered an incomplete pass.
Yeah. Next game is Oakland at Tennessee. I'll go ahead and go first. David Carr had a pretty good game. He went 22 for 32, had 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, got sacked twice. And his rating was really good. He had a 114.3. Lynch had a pretty good game. He had 18 rushes for 76 yards, and 1 reception for 16 yards. So if you have him in PPR, I mean that's not much, but he got you 16. He got you at least 2 points right there. Let's see what else. Lynch he had a pretty big part of the game. Carr was good. The kicker was outstanding. He made two field goals from 50 plus. He went 4 for 4 overall on field goals and 2 for 2 extra points. So he was 6 for 6 as far as field goals go. He had 14 points total. Their defense didn't get any picks. They had 1 sack on Marcus Mariota. Carr, Cooper, and Richard fumbled once, but they got it back. Oakland had a great game.
Right.
And this game was a lot about the kickers because there was a lot of kicking in this game. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 field goals in this game.
Yeah.
You want to do the Tennessee side?
Yep. Yeah. All right. So I guess so. My comment on first the Derek Carr thing was that I felt like he had an actually solid game. I think he probably had one of the best games of any quarterback that last week. So I think he had the most complete game. And then my only other comment about the Raiders is that even though they had those 3 fumbles, and fortunately for them, none of them were lost, but that's obviously a key going forward is you need to hold on to the ball because if you do lose some of those, then that game could be completely different. So
Baker, I need to break in for a second. We have breaking news.
What's that?
Sam Bradford will not play tonight. Will not play today. He has been ruled out. Case Keenum will start for Minnesota.
Okay.
So Sam Bradford is ruled out for today.
All right. Let's see. So we had okay, so for Marcus Mariota, I felt like he had a poor game. He had 256 yards passing. He had one rushing touchdown. That was the only touchdown that the Titans scored this game. So that was, and he was sacked. He had 0 interceptions, 0 fumbles, and he was only sacked once. But ultimately, I mean, if your only touchdown is a rushing touchdown, I mean, yeah, he got he got his team in a position to kick field goals. But I mean, at some point, I mean, obviously you got to score touchdowns. Field goals are not usually going to be enough to help you win games. DeMarco Murray had a meager 44 yards rushing, 0 touchdowns, so not exactly the way that I think they planned to start the season based on his production from last season. I think they were certainly trying to capitalize that on this year. Now, again, it's just 1 week, but I think you'd expect more. And then also, this was Eric Decker's debut with the Titans, and he only ended up with 3 receptions for 10 yards and, of course, 0 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So Tennessee, I mean, while they kind of tried to keep it close, I mean, at some point they lost control of the game, and you know, the Raiders defense obviously had to do something pretty good because they held Mariota in check, you know, except for the 1 rushing touchdown, but I mean, they held him in check.
All right. Now we move on to the Giants and Dallas, and I will start with the Giants. Eli Manning was a shit show, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
He was 29 of 38 for 220 yards and 1 interception. He got sacked 3 times. Their running offense only had 36 yards total of rushing. Brandley Marshall, a key player that they just added, he only had 1 reception for 10 yards. Other than that, I mean, they just played horrible. Like, they didn't get no interceptions. I don't even think they sacked Dak Prescott once the whole game. And other than that, I mean, it was just a complete shit show by the Giants. They really need Odell. I mean, Odell is the core of that team, I think. Like, if they don't have Odell, they're going to be absolute crap.
So my counter to that though is I don't think it was a complete shit show. I think they were terrible on offense, but I don't think they were that bad on defense. Because defensively they only gave up 1 touchdown. Everything else was field goals. So I mean, they had the bend but don't break mentality with Dallas. So, and I considered that pretty good considering that they couldn't do anything on offense.
I was more talking about the offense than I was the defense. I mean, the defense.
Okay, all right.
Defense had a good game. It's just the offense is not there for the Giants.
Yeah, so I mean, I felt like the defense did really well considering the position they were put in with, you know, the Giants, is the lack of any offense. The one thing that stood out to me too with the Giants offense, I mean, yeah, you mentioned OBJ. I mean, I don't even know if him being back, if that's going to be enough to make a huge difference for them. I mean, maybe it is, but my big question is, where the hell was Brandon Marshall? He had 1 reception for 10 yards, and that was it. Like, you're supposed to be some kind of like big free agent acquisition. I mean, I know that he's later in his career, but you're a big dude that can go up and get the ball. You're much taller than OBJ. You're much more physical than OBJ. Where the hell were you? Like, I mean, he just got shut down and was pretty much not a factor in the game at all. So that's, to me, that was very disappointing for if you're the Giants offense, is you expect this guy to be able to get in there and do something if OBJ is out.
All right.
On Dallas' side of the ball, again, you had Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott had an okay game. I say okay because, I mean, he had 1 passing touchdown with 268 yards passing, no interceptions. He was sacked once. But, I mean, again, that was, given how bad the Giants' offense was doing, their Cowboys' offense wasn't that great itself. I mean, Des Bryant was held in check. Terrence Williams, I think, had the most receiving yards on their team for that game. And I think he even went out injured at some point. So it's kind of like Des Bryant got held in check. Their receivers, I mean, the whole team was, effectively shut down. I mean, Zeke had, I think, a decent game, but again, like, beyond Zeke, like, the rest of their team is meh. So I think I did hear that Giants defense should be vastly improved compared to last season. They look good again considering the position they were put in. Giants defense looks pretty good this year. So if they can mount some offense, they can win some games.
They remind me right now. I mean, I know it's just week 1, but they remind me a lot of the 07 defense, like where Eli couldn't really score the ball, but the defense did just enough to keep them in the game to where they could win it.
Fly, we already announced that, dude. If you were here, you would have heard it. Preston announced it like probably 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. All right. Next game. Do you want to do another recap of either the Jags, Texans, Colts, Rams, or Chargers, Broncos, or do you just want to move into Thursday?
If you just want to, I guess if you just want to do something quick for those ones.
Okay. The Jags, they had a great game against the Texans. Blake Bortles, I don't think he threw an interception, did he?
No, he didn't throw any interceptions. They did, in my opinion. So last week we talked about this game, and we kind of glossed over it. Was one of our lightning round games, I believe. So my comment last week was whoever makes the fewest amount of mistakes would be the team to win, and the Jaguars made the fewest amount of mistakes. Fournette actually had a solid game. Bortles didn't throw. He didn't have to throw too much. I think he only had like slightly over 100 yards passing or something. He had no interceptions. I don't think he threw any touchdowns. But their defense was the one that came through. It was Houston's offense that made all the mistakes, and they were the ones that lost. So I mean, that basically shook out the way I thought it would.
Bortles did have a touchdown. He went 11 for 21 for 125 yards. Fournette had 26 rushes for 100 yards and a touchdown, and he also had.
That's pretty good. I think that was probably the best halfback of the week, right? I mean, I don't know if anyone else got over 100 yards or 100 yards rushing last week.
Kareem Hunt.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Hunt. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. But I guess we can go over the Colts. We don't need to really go to the Colts Rams. Just know the Colts offense totally got obliterated. Like, anytime a defense can score 56 points in fantasy on you, yeah, there's something wrong with your offense.
Right.
And the Chargers and Broncos came down to a blocked field goal.
McCoy was one as well. Okay, BJP. Yeah, I forgot about him. But again, LaShawn McCoy was solid last week too.
Yeah. And as far as the Chargers Broncos go, the Broncos blocked the field goal with like 5 seconds left to beat the Chargers. So, yeah. Other than that, I mean, it was a good slate. Now we're gonna dive into the Thursday night recap between the Texans and Bengals.
Oh, hang on. So I'm gonna cover the Colts Rams just real quick. So I mean, for anyone, I'm assuming maybe people heard about that game, but that was like a complete annihilation of the Colts by the Rams. Colts would be considered my second favorite team in the NFL. So that's why this one kind of hits a little home to me. Personally, I feel like the time has come to an end for Pagano. I think Chuck Pagano, I think he's got to go. I think it's over for him in Indy. I mean, I think they were trying to play nice with him because he had cancer and came back to the team and all that kind of stuff. And so, that was commendable by him. But this team has just been – now, I don't think it's just all on him. I think it's probably GM as well because I don't feel like they're getting very good players. Now, granted, I know that they've had people retiring, but again, like they've had no one to fill those spots. I mean, okay, yeah, maybe T.Y. could be comparable to a Reggie Wayne, but your offensive line is in shambles. Andrew Luck can't take more than like 1 second to throw the ball, or whoever's back there, they don't have much time to throw, and even then, they don't necessarily have anyone great to throw to. Or anyone who can get open quick enough. You got Frank Gore at halfback. He's still chugging away, doing pretty decent. But I still just feel, and then defensively, I don't feel like they have anyone at this point. I mean, they've lost anyone that had any name recognition in the past. With Mathis retiring this past offseason.
Yeah, I'm looking at their stats, and I don't know any of these guys. I mean, the only one I really can tell is Bostic. He's the only one on the Indianapolis defense that I know is Bostic. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, their defense is just like I don't know. I mean, I just feel like something's got to change there. I feel like Jim Irsay's got to make the call, and maybe they do like one of those mid-season firings and just say, look, we'll bring in someone new, or we'll promote like a offensive coach or defensive coach to be temporary coach for the remainder of the season. I mean, maybe I'm in panic mode too quick because Andrew Luck is expected to return at some point. But still, I think by the time he comes back, it may be too late. So maybe after this week's game, a determination can be made. But that game last week, Tolzien did not look ready to play. Tolzien definitely was not ready to play last week, I think he threw 2 pick sixes actually last week to the Rams. And so that propelled the Rams to a very easy win over the Colts.
Yeah. And also, if you look at Tolzien's rating, it was the worst rating of a QB in a long time. He had a 33.8 rating.
Yeah, it was just terrible.
Yeah, and he did throw 2 pick sixes.
Right.
Then he threw one to LaMarcus Joyner, and he threw one to Tremaine Johnson. And speaking about the Rams, Aaron Donald is expected to play today. So.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. All right. So now we're into the Thursday night recap, hopefully.
Yep.
All right. I don't know if some of y'all might be living under a rock or something, but Cincinnati fired the offensive coordinator on Friday, the day after the game. Because they're the first team in NFL history to go 2 straight games without having a touchdown in the first 2 weeks of the season. They're the first team to ever do that.
Jeez.
Deshaun Watson had a pretty good game. He had 15 completions for 15 out of 24 completed 15 to 24 passes, 125 yards. He got sacked 3 times. He ran 5 times for 67 yards and a touchdown. Hopkins was our best receiver. He had 7 receptions for 73 yards. And on defense, they had 3 sacks. They were interceptions. They had 3 sacks, and they pretty much harassed Dalton the whole night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they so yeah, some of the keys I had was the Deshaun Watson. He had the 49-yard touchdown scramble. So it was literally, I think, like a play or two after he got blown up by someone from Cincinnati. He got sacked pretty hard, and he took a good shot. But then like a play or two later, he ended up just like, it was basically Madden-esque. But he did pretty good. Like he knew he was running the ball, and then he called for people to stand up and get blocked. He basically took it to the left, bounced back to the right, took it down the sideline, and basically outran the entire Cincinnati defense for a 49-yard touchdown. That was the sad part is that was the only touchdown of the entire game. Everything else was field goals. Both QBs threw no interceptions. So that was I guess a plus for Andy Dalton compared to last week throwing 5 picks. Or 4 picks, whatever it was. Either way, it was way too many for one QB to have in one game. And then Deshaun Watson had the most rushing yards of any individual player on both games, or both teams. And then, as Preston mentioned, Cincinnati fired their offensive coordinator a day later, kind of making him the scapegoat for why their offense is not performing that well. I can't remember. I would assume that this is the same guy they had last year too. So I don't know. So I don't. One point I guess to make about this game is, and just like it should have been made about their game last week as well, I guess, was against the Ravens, and I think it may have made that point, was we had to keep in mind that Cincinnati let 2 core offensive linemen from their team walk this season, this off season. So they lost Whitworth, and I thought Zeitler was also there too. So they lost 2 keys to their offensive line, and then they're wondering, geez, why can't my quarterback make any plays? Well, that kind of happens when you take solid NFL linemen and then you let them go, and then you bring in like some bums, essentially to try to block for your QB. So the rushing game isn't that good. Whether they throw Mixon in there or Hill or whatever that other dude is. I forget his name, but yeah. So they've got three capable halfbacks, and none of them can do anything either. So part of that's got to be your line. Now, I will say one of the plays they had, I remember seeing because I saw it was, Dalton had a completed pass to one of their receivers, and then the guy got hit, and then immediately he coughed up the ball, and then it literally dropped in the hands of a Texans defender. So I mean, even when it seemed like they had some plays with some momentum, Houston found a way to take that away from them. So Houston's defense was pretty solid, I guess, against Cincinnati. But overall, like Cincinnati's just they're looking terrible. I don't know if a new offensive coordinator is really going to help them that much, especially with that defense. Now, granted, they were playing Houston, so it's kind of like, and it was Watson's first game as a starter, so you kind of expect somewhat of a dismal game from Deshaun Watson. But honestly, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the Browns may have played a better defense than Cincinnati, and Deshaun Kaiser had a far better game than Deshaun Watson, to be honest.
But there's another thing to this that I'm against Thursday night games unless it's either Thanksgiving or it's the week of Christmas. Like I understand the week of Christmas, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. That's cool. It's just like most of these games on Thursday nights are horrendous. It's like they're horrible. Except the opening night games. Those are pretty good. I just don't like the Thursday night concept. They just need to keep it to Sunday and Monday, and on Thanksgiving and Christmas have the Thursday night games.
BJP says, I didn't know Baker was a full-out NFL expert. I mean, I'm not a full-out NFL expert, but I will say that I do pay attention to a lot of games in the NFL. I know a lot of players. Most key players, I know which team they play for. So, I mean, I'm very well aware of most NFL teams and their capabilities and what kind of games they play and, their strategies and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm very knowledgeable, I think, at least within reason, in general across the league. So, certainly I'm going to know a little bit more about the Browns and their strategy and stuff like that. But, yeah, I mean, overall, I'm pretty level about my knowledge with every team.
Yeah. So what do you think about what I just said, Baker, about Thursday night games? Because I know we had talked about it earlier.
I like Thursday night games. I think you have to have them just because I feel like it's almost comparable to the idea of, I remember hearing this about like wrestling, for example. Like if it were up to Vince McMahon, you'd have wrestling every day on TV. And so while you may not have it every day on TV and you have house shows, literally the fact that you have a game, you have games on Thursdays, you have games on Sundays, you have games on Mondays, until you get to like the holidays, and you end up having games on Thursdays, Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays. Literally you have football's in your face almost 24/7, and that's what keeps the product and the brand relevant. And especially and I would say even more so with like they've had a decline in their sales. I think they noticed a decline in their sales starting week 1 this year. So unless that changes, I wouldn't expect them making any type of drastic changes where they stop showing football on more than just Sundays every week or Mondays. So I feel like it keeps the brand relevant, and you always have football in your face beyond just like sports people talking about the games and stuff like that.
Right. All right, so now, guys, we're going to walk our way into the Week 2 matchups previews. And I will start today with the Patriots and Saints.
They should do Friday nights.
Yeah, Thursday, Friday, Sunday. Because this new college football for Saturday. But, yeah, we're going to be talking Patriots Saints. Our defense is decimated going into this game. If we go down there and pull out a W in New Orleans, I would be surprised as a Patriots fan. Like, the defense is like, we lost Abner, we lost Hightower for this game. And on offense, we lost Amendola. We don't have Edelman. It's like we're not looking good going into the game. But I still have us pulling it out. I mean, because I'm a Patriots fan to the heart, so I still have us pulling this game out. I just don't know how we're going to be able to pull it out with our defense the way it is and our offense looking the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints. I expect a big day from Drew Brees. Honestly, like I think he's going to tear our defense apart. But I think we'll end up winning like 38-31 in like a shootout type of game, where some high scoring
Okay.
game. As far as the Saints go, if you have AP, I wouldn't expect a big game out of him because I mean, Sean Payton. I think AP went to the wrong team. Like if he's looking for a running offense, he should have went to like Dallas or like Carolina, somewhere where they run the ball a lot. He went to a team where it's basically an air raid offense. Where they
Well, I mean, and they already have a solid starting halfback in Mark Ingram. I mean, Mark Ingram has been consistent for at least the last 3 seasons for them, and he's only gotten better. Even last year, he had like one of his better years. So the fact is that he has to split carries not only with him, but then there's also the other guy they have as well. So I mean, it's a very crowded backfield.
Yeah. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Saints release one of their 2 running backs, either AP or the other guy. I wouldn't be surprised if they release one of them because I mean, this is too many carries for too many people.
Yeah.
All right, so
Well, yeah, and I saw the article where he said like I didn't sign up for 9 carries.
yeah.
I mean, I think he was mainly more disappointed too, though, that it was his homecoming against his former team, and so he was looking to make a statement, and then he just couldn't. They just didn't get him involved, and so I mean, and usually, I mean, I don't know. I didn't watch the game at all on TV, so I have no idea like what they did with him. I mean, yeah, okay, he had 9 carries, but I don't know what were those 9 carries. Did they try something unique with him? Usually, when you have like you have a player that has a vendetta against another team, that you try to do things with that player to give them an opportunity to be extremely successful against their former team. So I don't know if they really went out of the way to get a game plan just for him, or if they just kind of said, well, here's what we're going to do, just do what we tell you to do, and that's it. Like if they didn't really do anything to try to make it his thing, or to help him like feel a sense of accomplishment in that game, which it seems like that's the case, then it's kind of like, well, yeah, then why even bother sign me if you're not going to really use me?
That's the same thing with Eddie Lacy. I mean, he only had 5 carries last week against Green Bay, and he was talking about all this junk while he's going to jump and do the Lambeau leap and stuff. He only had 5 carries for 3 yards the whole game.
Right.
I mean, it's just like these guys have to get over themselves and realize it's a team game, not a one-person game.
Right.
All right. Now, do you want to go ahead and do yours, or do you want me to keep going with the next one?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do one of mine. All right. So the first game I have on my radar for this week. Again, you guys are going to notice some bias towards the games I choose, mainly because I pay a lot of attention to divisional games, mainly divisional games in the AFC North, because that's where my team plays from. So mainly it'll be AFC North, but I try to go outside of there. But either way, so we have the first game I have on my list for this week is the Browns at Ravens, of course. So in this game, Myles Garrett is going to be out again this week. So hopefully next week he'll actually be able to return. That would be awesome. Also, it looks like Zeitler, he ended up with a thumb injury last week in the Steelers game. But it looks like he's actually going to play this game. So he'll play with that thumb injury, but it looks like he'll be fine to go this week. So, but that may be something to look for because offensively it could impact his ability to block a little bit. But we'll see. On the Ravens side, Danny Woodhead is out. So my understanding, I didn't really look, but I thought he actually was one of the reasons why they did so well last week, other than the Ravens defense and Cincinnati's poor offense. But Danny Woodhead, I thought he had an impact game last week, but he is out this week against the Browns, so it's going to be strictly on Terrence West, a former Brown, to try to run the ball and do something for the Ravens. Offensively, the Browns' game plan really needs to be, I shouldn't say it shouldn't be all centered around running the ball, but they have to run the ball better. That's the key. That's one of the keys of the game to me for the Browns is running the ball more. and getting more positive yards. I shouldn't say running it more, but getting more positive yards on each carry. Finding ways to get Crowell, even if you have to do passes to the flats, quick passes to the flats and get Crowell some space, or Duke Johnson. Browns have 3 capable running backs in their backfield that can all make guys miss. So go ahead and use those guys as best you can for quick yards. And then the key for the passing attack would be throwing the ball a lot quicker. I touched on it earlier. Kizer was sacked 7 times last week. Most reasons because of the fact that he could have got the ball out quicker and he just didn't do it. So, do your one count to 3. Make sure that ball's out of your hands. You can't sit back there, counting the 7, 8, 9, anything like that, and still expect to not be pressured at that point. Ravens offense, their key would be against the Browns would be running the ball effectively to open up passing for Maclin and Wallace. So last week the strategy the Browns employed against the Steelers was keep everything in front of you. If for some reason the Browns have a hard time maintaining the run, or controlling the run, then that may force the guys that like Jabril Peppers standing back 25 yards, not even on the screen in most of the plays. They may not have the fortune of keeping him that far back if the Ravens offense is able to run the ball effectively. If the Browns are able to control that, then they can sit back and wait for Flacco to try to pass and try to maintain some effective pass defense. So on the Browns defensive side this week, I feel like they need to build on last week. So like I said, the strategy was keep everything in front of you, and again shut down the run game. So that should be the main focal point this week. If they can shut down the run game, then it keeps the Ravens one-dimensional. It forces Joe Flacco to have to pass. If you can find a way to get any pressure on the QB because he's not really known for running that well. If you can get any pressure on him, then that would certainly help and force some errant throws.
Jamal Lewis.
Then on the Ravens defensive side, their key I think would be getting to Kizer and stopping the run. If they can shut down Cleveland's run game, similar to what Pittsburgh did last week, then you force Kizer to have to throw, but there's no guarantee that that's going to help you win the game because you need to get to Kizer to force him to make bad decisions.
I'm watching TV right now. I'm doing something.
Over here because I don't want Quan over here. You'll have to come over here if I need you here.
So that so those are the keys to the game for Browns and Ravens, both sides of the ball. Was there? Oh, so it looks like Preston stepped away for a minute. All right, so next one, I'll move on. So, you're back?
Yeah, I had to take something real quick. I wanted to say a little bit about the Browns game. I think if they control the run like they did last week, they could beat Baltimore. I mean, how many yards did Le'Veon Bell have last week? I think it was like 35, right?
32. 32.
I think if they could keep Terrence West to about that number, they'll force Joe Flacco into some bad decisions, and I think Cleveland might come away with this one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so my next game is Philadelphia and Kansas City. The reason why I picked this one is because I expect a pretty good game out of this game. Kansas City with their run game. I mean, look what they did to the Patriots last week. I mean, it's like we couldn't stop anything they did last week. On Philly's side of the ball, I mean, Carson Wentz, he should have a good game. Let's see what else I'm looking at here. Let's see for what. Let's see. They're expecting. Damn. All right, there we go. Okay, I found it. Philly. Philly should be good. I'm expecting a pretty good game out of them. I'm thinking it's. Let's see. Damn. Trying to get my words together. Sorry, Baker. It's this has a big game feel to it. But I think it's a big game with KC.
I mean, I think the I think the one thing that should be mentioned here is the fact that this is so obviously the Chiefs had a big game last week. So the question is, are they going to be able to produce a similar big game this week? Is Alex Smith going to prove me wrong? And maybe there's more than just me, but I mean, I say it from that perspective because everyone knows my personal opinion of Alex Smith as a QB in this league. So is he going to be able to capitalize on what they did last week and have any amount of big plays, do things against this Eagles defense? I mean, the Eagles defense isn't impenetrable necessarily, but they did hold Washington to only 1 touchdown this past week. I would consider the Chiefs offense probably a little bit more potent than Washington. So I feel like the Chiefs offense, they have more weapons, and they have more speed. So I feel like they have an opportunity to make something of this game. But yeah, I would love nothing more than for Alex Smith to prove me wrong. But again, I think this is his game. This is a second game for him to try to prove that he can be an actual good quarterback. He can make the throws when they matter, and he's not just a game manager.
Yeah, and also there's going to be a big test for the Eagles defense because they're missing their best corner in Ronald Darby this week. So they will be leaning on Jalen Mills and Patrick Robinson. And they said that the Chiefs should go with the screen game this week. Right? Because they're fast and physical. So if you do the screen, then they can't be that fast.
Yeah.
So don't let number 3 key is don't let Blunt get going. Don't let him run the ball very much.
Right.
Number 4 is make Wentz win from the pocket. They're saying that if they can keep him in his pocket, then they could probably beat him. And okay, that stuff. And we'll look at so the big thing for them. Jeffrey. That's their big key.
Your voice is cutting out like really bad.
Am I still cutting out?
That sounds a little better. When you were just talking a second ago, it's kind of like sounding robotic.
Oh, sorry. And the guy has the Chiefs winning 27-20. So.
Okay.
So I was robotic. I'm sorry. I think I lost all my data already.
Oh, jeez.
But it doesn't affect my voice stuff, luckily.
Right. Okay. What's up, Cam? K-Dog, BakerBot's not going. It's not working today for some reason. Something's wrong. All right. So next game I had to discuss was the Vikings and Steelers. So this game, so it looks like based on the injury report I read, it looks like Tuitt, who had a biceps-related injury last week against the Browns, is going to be ready to go, and Wilcox, who ended up knocking himself out and got fined $25,000 for it. He will also play as well, based on the injury report I read. Sam Bradford originally, I mentioned that he was a game time decision, so that to me that kind of changes things. Sam Bradford was probably one of the best QBs week 1 in the NFL in terms of performance against the Saints. So without Sam Bradford, I mean, I don't know how many reps that their backup got, but presumably not ready. BJP, yeah, we mentioned that earlier on in the broadcast actually. So that's not new, but yeah, it was something I wanted to point out. Originally, he was supposed to be a game time decision, but we learned like a half hour ago that they've already ruled him out. So yeah.
In case Kim gets
so keys to this game, I mean, it's going to be. I still feel like even with Bradford out, Vikings still have a pretty good chance. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Vikings are supposed to have one of the best defensive units this season. And I think they kind of showed it last week against Drew Brees and the Saints. I mean, they shut down their offense. So, I mean, and the Steelers weren't very impressive last week as well. I mean, they did okay, but like I said, I mean, their one tight end got both touchdowns they had, so it's not like they had a great offensive performance as well. So I mean, if it could just be a difference of one play that the Vikings make to keep the game in their favor. So I mean, I feel like this could probably end up being a close game, especially with Sam Bradford not playing. But I feel like the Vikings defense could be enough to keep could be and should be enough to keep them in the game and competitive here and potentially come out with the win. And that's all I had for Vikings Steelers.
Okay. Biggest thing for the Steelers is to get LeVon Bell going. That's the biggest thing for me. They need to get him going. If they can get him going, then they can pass the ball to AB and their receivers.
Yeah.
That's the big thing for them is to get Le'Veon Bell going.
Possibly. I mean, he kind of last week he blamed production on the lack of touches, but he had 10 carries for 30 yards. So, I mean, it's like when you're averaging 3 yards a rush, you're probably not going to get the ball too much.
Yeah. All right.
So I mean, if the Vikings, in theory, all they need to do is look at what the Browns did last week and employ that defensively. Against the Steelers. I mean, it's not like the Steelers have different guys playing this week offensively. So, I mean, they'll have the same guys they had. And so as long as the Vikings keep everything in front of them, then they should be fine. They're not going to allow any big plays. Oh,
Baker.
Yeah.
Did anybody retweet your tweet besides me last night? That was funny.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
That was funny last night. Anyways, next game is Cowboys and Broncos. This is basically an offense versus defensive game. It's the Cowboys offense versus the Broncos defense.
Yeah, so we did the Madden simulation of this one yesterday for anyone who was here or wasn't here. So we did a Madden simulation of this game yesterday, and Denver absolutely just destroyed Dallas's defense, which is kind of weird. I don't expect that kind of game today because it was like 52 to something or whatever.
52-29 or something.
Yeah, so it could be that could show that there's a potential matchup issue there. So certain teams match up pretty well that allow you to have good back and forth games, but this could be just one of those games where guys, I find it very interesting. This I usually get this kind of feedback mainly from people who support or maybe people who just live in Pennsylvania or people who support certain teams, is that you are very confident about the game going one way, but you're not really thinking it through. So actually spend time thinking through the game before you're saying, oh, this team's gonna win. They're gonna win. I mean, there's no guarantee. Look, consider that the Broncos have one of the best defenses in the league. And last week, the Cowboys only could score one touchdown against the Giants. Now, how do they rank overall against all defenses? At this point, I have no idea. But the Giants held the Cowboys one touchdown. So the Broncos have a better defense. They're going to hold them to possibly just one touchdown. So the defense could make all the difference in this game, even with Simeon as the Broncos quarterback. So, but the keys to this game, based on the game yesterday, is getting CJ Anderson, getting the Denver, getting their rushing game going, and allowing Simeon the opportunity to be able to throw the ball as much as he wants to, and having Dallas worry about the run being effective. Yeah. So that's going to be key for them offensively. And then, of course, defensively is just, employ your defense. Hopefully they paid attention to what the Giants did last week. As long as they can shut down, they've got the guys to perform good man coverage against Dallas. So I feel like the Broncos, should be able to employ the same defensive strategy that the Giants employed last week against them and hold them to few points.
Yeah, and I was looking forward to this game, but because I'm in Washington area, so I have to watch the Redskins and Rams. But I was actually looking forward to this Cowboys-Broncos game.
Yeah.
I think
so we could see. I mean, maybe it's completely reverse of what we saw with Madden. And I'm not saying Madden, just because you do a Madden sim, it's 100% depiction of how the game's going to go. But I will say that there is some level of realism there in terms of matchups between players and stuff like that. So, if it goes in Denver's favor, if they can do some of the things that they were successfully doing in the game yesterday in the sim, then that could be more than enough to help them win this game.
Yeah, and Simeon almost threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in the sim yesterday.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, yeah, so that's why I said it's not. I don't expect the same type of game because even like freaking Anderson had like 200 yards or some shit like that rushing. So that was a huge game. That's inflated score, so I don't expect it to be that high, but it still could be a pretty big difference in score. Broncos could end up pulling away with a big scoring differential, but I don't think they're going to score 52 points.
In our last game that we both are talking about is the Packers at Falcons. Tonight is the official opening of Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. This is also a playoffs rematch between the Packers and Falcons of the NFC Championship game. I like the Falcons to win tonight because I think Matt Ryan is going to have a big game. I think Devontae Freeman is going to get the ball rolling with the running. I think they're going to be able to run the ball tonight, and that's going to open up Julio and Sanu and them to get passes and stuff. I think the Falcons will win tonight, and I think it'll be close because Aaron Rodgers is on the other team, so you always have to think that it's going to be a close game with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback. But I think the Falcons win 21-17.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like, and then I guess the big point of this is that this is effectively a rematch of the NFC Championship game from last year, in which the Packers, I would say they got pretty much manhandled, last season by the Falcons defense, and the defense is, in theory getting better. Obviously they look pretty rusty week one against the Bears, but so this is another week into it. They played these guys last year, so. And the only difference between this year and last year is the Packers have Martellus Bennett and they lost Eddie Lacy. I feel like last year Eddie Lacy was still playing, but I don't feel like he was very effective at all against the Falcons. So Aaron Rodgers was forced to pass a lot, and that's what caused Aaron Rodgers to get sacked a lot, or at least he got hurried a lot. He was always scrambling around the field and getting beat up and stuff like that. So that was their strategy last year. So, honestly, the key to this game for the Packers may very well rest on the shoulders of Ty Montgomery. If Ty Montgomery can be effective in the running game, or at least, again, any screens or flat passes in the flats, anything to get their pseudo run game going, the Packers could potentially be successful, or at least more successful than they were in that game at the end of last season. So Atlanta, again, yeah, the key is going to be can Matt Ryan hit Julio Jones for some touchdowns? Is he going to have a similar game that he had against the Packers last year? I think he had a big game against them last year anyway. So, even though, he's going to get obviously all the attention, like you said, they have a lot of speed on the field now, or still, as well as last year. So there's plenty of options for Matt Ryan to go to. This Atlanta team basically stayed intact compared to last year. So so that it's almost a 1-to-1 similar game, similar matchup to last year.
But the one thing that's different this year in this matchup, I think, is that the Green Bay receivers are healthy and their defense is healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So Packers were they were banged up going into the game last year.
Yeah, the defense wasn't there. They didn't have a defense going into that game. Like, everybody was hurt, and then Jordy Nelson was out. So
he was in, but he got hurt. Then he was out.
Yeah. So that's the big thing for me, is that both teams are healthy going into this game. So let's see which team wins with both teams being healthy.
Yeah, and I feel like if Atlanta blows the doors off, in this game, I feel like it's gonna be their division to win. I feel like they're gonna be the ones that can win their division this year, and I feel like they're they'll make another run in the playoffs if based on their performance in this game.
Yep. All right. Next up is lightning round matchup preview. You gonna switch the card thing?
I did. Yep.
That was quick. Nobody typed
takes-
it in. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So first game we have is Bears at Buccaneers. Bears. Buccaneers.
We'll touch on that, Bardo. He asked how badly do you guys think the Jets will be smacked this week. Don't look at it that way, though, dude.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. But I had the Buccaneers winning this game, and it's the first game. I mean, it's kind of like Houston, but I didn't expect Houston to play that bad. Like, this is Tampa Bay's first game at home. It's after a hurricane. The fans are going to be rowdy. The team's going to be out ready to play. Jameis Winston's going to be playing. I just feel like if the Bucs do better than Atlanta did last week, I think this could be the Bucs division this year.
Okay.
What do you think about the Bears at Bucs?
I mean, well, I feel like honestly, I feel like the Bears actually have a legitimate chance of winning this game. I mean, the Falcons have a much better team, in my opinion, compared to the Bucs. And so I feel like, and the Bears already have one game under their belt. They already played Atlanta, and they hung in there with Atlanta. So if they can employ the same defense that they, if they can have the same type of defense and drive that they had against Atlanta last week, against the Bucs, this could be also another very close game, and the Bears may actually be able to pull this game out, especially since the Bucs, again, it's their first game, so they're going to be the rusty team. The Bears got one game under their belt, and they're going in, and yeah, there may be momentum on the Bucs side, maybe being at home and all that kind of stuff, but in theory, we thought that about the Texans as well, and the Texans got completely manhandled by the Jags. So, I mean, now granted, I realize the Texans are a different team, compared to the Bucs. They don't have Jameis Winston or anything like that, but I feel like for that reason, it could be a reason why the Bucs come out a little. They come out rusty, and the Bears, I think, have an actual good chance of winning this game.
Okay. Yeah. I think the extra week of practice kind of helps Tampa Bay too. Like, they had a whole week to dissect the Bears.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like they were coming off a win and they had to like they had to be in practice Monday. They got to practice all last week, basically they had basically 2 weeks to practice for the Bears because they knew their game one. The first game wasn't going to be played at home, and the first game wasn't going to be played against Miami. So they basically had 2 weeks to prepare for the Bears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next game is Titans at Jags. This is going to be a good game, I think. I think this is going to be one of them down to the wire games.
Yeah.
The Jaguars' defense looked pretty good last week against Houston, but then again, like it's Tom Savage, so I mean, you expect them to have a good game against Houston. But I expect the Titans to win this game. I know it's being played in Jacksonville, but I think the Titans will win by 10 maybe 14 points.
I mean, I feel like it could go either way, but I don't think it's gonna be a huge. I don't think there's gonna be a huge gap in the score between the two. I mean, I feel like, again, the Jags playing this week, their mindset needs to be make the fewer mistakes. I feel like the Jaguars may have equal or potentially even better defense than the Raiders, and the Titans played the Raiders last week, and so and the Raiders held the Titans in check. They didn't sack Mariota but once, and Mariota got one touchdown, but they also had a shit ton of field goals. So obviously the Raiders had a good defense against this team, and the Titans don't really have, again, to me, they don't really have any standout receivers. I mean, they've got DeMarco Murray, but the Jags, I think, are effective. They can stop the run. Pretty sure they did good against Lamar Miller last week. But, the Jags, I think they have the ability to stop the run. They can certainly stop the pass. Offensively, again, I just think it's about use Fournette. You know, he had 100 yards last week. Lynch had 87 yards against Titans last week rushing, and that was his first game in. Fournette could end up having like a ridiculous game against the Titans. He could end up going 125 and a couple touchdowns potentially based on that. You know, he had a solid game last week against a pretty high-rated defense for Houston. You know, with J.J. Watt and Clowney on that front line, so that's pretty good. So I mean, I feel like Fournette could go 125 and 2 touchdowns in this game against the Titans, and I feel like the Jags have a really good chance of winning this game.
Yeah. The one thing that I think will hurt the Jags is the passing games. They lost their best receiver last week, so that's going to hurt their passing game. So I think they're going to have to get the ball to Fournette more in this game.
Yeah.
So yeah. Next up is Cards at Colts. Where do you start with this game, Baker?
I mean, yeah, well, I mean, I think you start with the injuries. No. So I mean, obviously Cardinals are going to be without Johnson, and the Colts are obviously going to be without, well, obviously Andrew Luck again, but Tolzien's going to be sitting. You're going to have Jacoby Brissett making his first NFL start. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of, you know, offense they put around him. Like I said, to me, this could actually be a winnable game for the Colts. But the Cardinals have a stingy defense, so that's going to make it tough on them. I mean, it could end up exactly like last week, where if Brissett gets rushed or panicked, or you know, Cardinals defense plays strong, then you know, Jacoby Brissett could have one hell of a day in front of him, and not in a good way. But I feel like for me, this to me is it's a winnable game. Colts hopefully should be competitive, but you know, I feel like the Cardinals, they still have the ability to probably edge this one out, given that, you know, their offense isn't completely gone. They still have Carson Palmer, they still have Larry Fitzgerald, they still have other offensive weapons they can, you know, employ, and the Colts defense is kind of meh. So I feel like it could be a close game. Actually, I feel like there could be a game of field goals, if anything. But I feel like the Cards could probably squeak it out.
Yeah, I picked up the Cards defense this week, so I have them starting. But I mean, as the clock gets closer, I mean, I have like 30 minutes to change it. I'm thinking about changing it, but I'm not sure yet. Because right now I have the Cards starting, but we'll see what happens. All right, next game is Bills at Panthers.
Your audio just went out completely. Hello? I can't hear you if you're talking. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. So we were on Bills Panthers, right? Okay. I have to get my head straight. All right. I have the Panthers winning this game. I think it'll be close, but I have the Panthers eking it out with Cam Newton.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I feel like it could be anyone's game, to be honest. I mean, the Panthers only scored, 23 points against the 49ers last week, and the 49ers, I mean, I guess I don't really know too much about Buffalo's defense, but you know, I feel like their offense is good enough to score against Carolina. I feel like LaShawn McCoy is a good enough weapon for the Bills to keep them competitive. What was it? Matthews, I think, had a decent game last week for the Bills. Jordan Matthews, the guy they got from the Eagles, he had a decent game last week. So I mean, they have more weapons than the 49ers do, and the Panthers, I felt like, struggled with the 49ers to try to score. So
yeah, it was 23.
This could be it could make for a potential upset here, in my opinion. I mean, the Bills will be competitive. It could be a very close game.
Panthers, but all right, the next one, Jets at Raiders. Raiders should win this one pretty easily.
In theory.
Yeah, in theory.
Trap game.
Yeah, Raiders should win this in a blowout. Like it should not be within 20 points. Like Raiders,
In theory.
yeah.
In theory, I don't know, man. I mean, yeah, it's hard to see the Jets having a chance. I mean, you know, offensively, are they going to be able to do anything? I don't know. I mean, again, the only reason why the Titans scored last week is because they have a mobile quarterback. Josh McCown's no Marcus Mariota when it comes to his ability to run the ball. If anything, he's pretty good at getting concussed when doing that. Yeah, it's tough to see the Jets winning this game. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a blowout, but I mean, I feel like the Raiders should use this game to try to prove something to themselves. You know, get Marshawn Lynch more involved, see if you can get him a pretty good game. You know, focus more on the run. Don't make Derek Carr to have to pass too much unless you absolutely have to. You know, try to spend time working out the kinks in your offense.
Right.
I think the Raiders win though, but I mean, I feel like they should use it as a game, just kind of brush up and clean up any more rust you may have offensively. And hold on to the ball. Hold on to the ball.
Yeah. Next game is Dolphins at Chargers. I don't really have anything to say on this game, so Baker, if you have anything to say.
Dolphins at Chargers. Oh God, this I feel like could end up being one of those sloppy games. I feel for some reason I kind of feel like it's got one of those sloppy games. I mean, the Dolphins defense is good enough, I think, to stop Phillip Rivers. So I feel like they're not maybe Broncos good, but I feel like they're good enough. Their front line is good enough to pressure Phillip Rivers. That may be enough to shut down Gordon. So they may have to. It may be on Phillip Rivers to try to make passes. I mean, Keenan Allen, I don't know what he did last week, but I don't think he had a huge game that I'm aware of. So, you know, I feel like the Dolphins could probably pull this game off. I mean, again, it's their first game of the season, so they may be showing rust. But at the same time, they've got Jay Cutler at quarterback. So that's, you know, I feel like if they're smart, they're going to give the ball to Jay Ajayi a lot. You know, get Jay Cutler comfortable with some passes to the flats, some screens, do things to help try to build his confidence and keep him calm. Don't let him throw a lot. Jarvis Landry, obviously they've got him, so I mean their offense isn't gonna completely struggle that much, but you know Jay Cutler's not Ryan Tannehill, and so I mean I feel like this could end up being one of those kind of gritty, sloppy kind of games where there's a lot of turnovers from both sides. You know, I feel like the Dolphins may have a little bit more to be able to squeak it out, maybe defensively, but either way, I feel like this could end up being a very close game and pretty messy.
Well, I'm biased, so you know I'm going with the Chargers in this game.
Okay.
Next game is another blowout that, like, figuratively, it should be a blowout. Is the 49ers and Seahawks. The Seahawks should win this game, but really, that is the question. I know. I got the time on my phone.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like this could end up being a close one too, though. But yeah, I mean, Brian Hoyer didn't exactly have a stellar performance last week. Obviously, this is Kyle Shanahan's first year as a head coach, so this is going to be this season's going to be a huge learning experience for him. Again, I mean the Panthers, I felt like Gabe. The Panthers, I felt like, again, they struggled against the 49ers last week. I felt like the Panthers struggled against them to score. They made it. The 49ers did not make it easy for them. That felt like that should have been a blowout game. The final score maybe kind of reflected that to some extent, but it wasn't like a huge blowout for the Panthers against them. So, I mean, and the Seahawks struggled against a Green Bay defense that we don't necessarily know is a top defense in the league yet, and they struggled against them pretty bad. So if the 49ers have if they show any type of defense like they showed last week against the Panthers, I mean the Seahawks could be in for another scrappy game. It could be another close game, a game of field goals, basically. I feel like it could end up being one of those games. I mean, I don't think the 49ers may have it in them to win it, but I'm not necessarily counting them out.
Okay. All right. Next game is Redskins Rams. I like the Rams in this game, not because of the defense, because of the offense. I mean, their offense is pretty good.
Wow.
Huh? What? What happened?
I just said wow.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, I don't know, dude. I feel like the Rams have a lot to prove. Obviously, their offense was a good against a kind of just not so great Colts defense, and the Colts turned the ball over a lot. So the Rams were on offense quite a bit. But the Rams also did kick a lot of field goals too. So I mean, it's not like when they had the ball that Goff was throwing, like he didn't throw like 10 touchdowns in that game. So it's not like they were going gangbusters on the Colts defense just because. I mean, they just happened to have the ball a lot more offensively. But they didn't. All those didn't turn into touchdowns. So I don't feel like the Rams' offense is that great. They just had a lot of opportunities given to them, and they've got shit. Who's their halfback again?
Who?
Not Gordon, but who's the Rams halfback again? Forget.
It's not Gordon. I don't remember. Hold on, let me look it
up. But either way, I feel like in this game they're going to have to use their halfback a lot. I don't think that they have the offense yet necessarily to compete with Redskins defense. Gurley, right? So I feel like Gurley's going to have to be very heavily involved in this game for the Rams to have a chance. Defensively, they might be able to hold their own, but I feel like last week again that was I feel like that was week one. That was a week one game. I'll just chalk it up to that and say it was a week one game against a Colts offense that was terrible. So the Rams still have to prove something, and this week will be a good test for them to see how good their offense truly is, and to see how good their defense truly is. I mean, the Redskins, again, they struggled last week against Philadelphia, and Philadelphia I don't think necessarily is considered a top defense in the league. Maybe they're somewhere in the top 10, maybe, or the outskirts of top 10. The Rams, they always seem to have a pretty strong defense, so, the Redskins could struggle against them too, and for that reason, that could help the Rams play a similar game or be in a similar position like they were in last week, where offensively they have the ball a lot more often than not. And then that ends up being the key to help them win. But I feel like it's going to be a challenge for the Rams, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was a close game.
Alrighty then. The last game is Lions at Giants. Your thoughts, sir?
Lions at Giants. Wow. So it looks like OBJ is going to be out again. He was still marked as questionable on Saturday, so I feel like there's a pretty good chance he could end up missing the game. Even if he does play, it doesn't sound like he's at 100% anyways. So if anything, it's more of the whole decoy type of situation where he's there just to have someone cover him, but they're definitely not going to have two guys on him. The Giants, again, the thing that can help the Giants stay in this game will be their defense. Now again, how does their defense stack up against Arizona's defense? I don't know. But again, the Giants held the Cowboys only one touchdown last week. If they can impose their will against the Lions the same way they did against the Cowboys, the Lions, again, they have a pretty good offense, but again, Matt Stanford Matthew Stafford threw he threw a pick six last week, so I mean there's no saying that it won't happen again this week. Well, I'm getting some drop frames all of a sudden. Uh-oh. That's not good. Yeah, so they could end up having a pretty okay, now it should be back to normal.
No, Michael, the stream.
No, hang on. They have to refresh. Hang on. Something all of a sudden my internet just went to crap. All right. Yeah, I feel like the Giants defense is what could help keep them in this game. But hopefully they took some time to figure out what they could do to improve their offense this week against the Lions defense. I don't see Lions defense as being like a highly rated defense in the league just yet. So, I mean, I feel like the Giants could have some success against them. It's just going to come down to the Giants defense is going to have to make a lot of plays to keep them in this game.
All right. Like you said, Giants going to have to make big plays in this game. Lions have okay running back. They have some good receivers. Their defense is okay. I mean, they did pretty well after Johnson went out last week, so I mean, that's not really telling of how good this Lions defense might be.
Right. Yeah, I mean, keeping in mind, again, that, the only reason why Dallas was able to move the ball last week, one of the main reasons was Ezekiel Elliott. The Lions don't have Ezekiel Elliott on their team, and they've got Golden Tate. So, I mean, other than that, I don't know any other receiver that plays for the Lions. They've got, the tight end, what's his name? I can't remember. But, they've got, like, two guys. But, I mean, I don't think they really have a great wide receiver core. They don't have anything like Dallas, and they shut down Dallas. So, I mean, I feel like that's going to be a tough game for the Lions. I think Eli Manning is going to get a lot of opportunities to throw the ball and be on the offensive side of the ball.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. That's about it. I do want to go back on the let's see, what game was it? Never mind. Okay. All right, so that's it with that. So, anyways, who's our fan? So now we have to pick our fantasy player of the week. I forgot to put that in. So with our fantasy player of the week, me and Baker will each pick one player that stood out to us last week as the player of the week. So, Baker, do you want to go first?
Sure. I feel like someone who stood out to me last week as a good top fantasy player of the week. I'm not going to go with any of the obvious choices because I feel like there's a couple of obvious ones, but a less obvious one, at least in my opinion, would be Tyreek Hill. So I feel like Tyreek had a great game last week, of course, against New England. Depending upon what type of fantasy league you're in, if you get points for like special teams and stuff like that, Tyreek is an effective player on special teams. But he was a huge factor in their offense last week, getting by the Patriots defense at least once for a touchdown. And I don't think I even expected him to have that type of game. And if the Kansas City offense can continue playing the same way they did last week, he could actually be a very solid, I guess, if you will, sleeper pickup. Because I don't know how many people had him as in their starting lineups going into the season. So, but I feel like he could be a very good sleeper pickup if Kansas City can continue to have solid games and continue to use him in their passing game.
All right. My player of the week is none other than Alex Smith.
Oh, God. Stop the presses.
Yes. In fantasy, he had 43 points. He, let's see. He had 4 touchdowns, 368 passing yards, and I think it was, 1 pick maybe?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if he got picked.
No picks, but he got sacked 3 times. He had 2 40-yard completions, 2 40-yard passing touchdowns. And I mean, he was definitely the player of the week last week for me. Like, even though he's not on my team, like, he was the player of the week last week. Now, if that continues this week, is yet to be seen. But for this week, Alex Smith is my player of the week.
Why did I put that? Sorry. Nothing. Something I typed in chat. I don't know why I typed that. So, yeah, I mean, I think the other obvious fantasy pick, well, it's not even necessarily a player, but I would say team of the week last week, of course, was the Rams defense, because then you said they had like 50-some points or some shit like that. 56 points, yeah. So now I will say I think the fantasy play or team of the week this week potentially is a team's defense that I have in one league, which was the Bengals. The Bengals, when I had two options. I had Philadelphia's defense against Kansas City or the Bengals defense against the Texans, and I felt like with Deshaun Watson making his first start of his NFL career, I felt like the Bengals would be able to hold him. And while they lost contain on him on one play for the most part, they were able to hold them for the rest of the game. So the Bengals ended up with 43 points on defense for me. So that was a great game for them, and they may be one of the highest scoring defenses this week. Aside, maybe I could see the Raiders probably having a high scoring defense this week, and the Rams they might be up there.
Yeah, and Arizona might be up there, depending on how well they play against the Diablos. Yeah.
Now, what about what do you think about for this week? Any projections for highest fantasy player or most valuable fantasy player of the week this week?
Well, it's certainly not going to be Drew Brees. Of course, I'm saying that because me and Baker play in fantasy this week. I'm going to say that the big game might come from. See, I don't know. Like, it's tough. For my team, I'm hoping it's something good for Hunt. Like, I want him to do replicate what he did last week. That's my big thing for my team. Other than that,
for who?
Hunt, Kareem Hunt.
Oh, Hunt.
He should have another good week. But if I had to pick somebody on, like, say your team, I'd say Drew Brees.
Well, I was just saying in general across the league. I mean, even if they're not on your team, just anyone.
All right, so they're not on my team. Quarterback, I think it would be Drew Brees. I think he's gonna have a monster week. Running back, Fournette probably will have a huge week.
Yeah.
Wide receiver, I'm gonna go with Antonio Brown. Or Julio. Antonio or Julio. Tight end Greg Olsen. He should have a big game this week. And defense, I think Seattle or Oakland will have the best game out of the defenses.
Okay.
What about you?
So for quarterback, I don't know. I think I have like two. I think I have two picks. I mean, I feel like, I kind of think I may have to actually agree with Michael for once. I feel like Derek Carr could end up topping out on, and I think that's kind of maybe the more obvious choice, though. I mean, I feel like Derek Carr will probably have some pretty good stats this week. He could end up being the fantasy player of the week for a QB. I feel like low key, though, and again, this is truly speculation, and that's kind of directly related to the Madden simulation, but I feel like low-key Trevor Siemian could actually be a fantasy player of the week. No joke. I'm not even lying. Like, I feel like there's a chance that he could actually throw like a few touchdowns or something against the Dallas defense, given what we saw last week. Again, I know New York didn't move the ball on them, but Dallas's defense didn't really necessarily just always stop New York, and So I don't know. So I feel like that Trevor Siemian low key could actually have a pretty good week. I'm not saying go pick him up in fantasy right now, but you know if he can start doing something consistent, then maybe. But I feel like he could actually have one of the better games this week. For halfback, I'm thinking. Honestly, I'm gonna say. The obvious choice, I think, could end up being Marshawn Lynch. I feel like Marshawn Lynch would be obvious. Like you said, Fournette. I like Fournette for the Jags as well. I see him, like I said earlier. I feel like he could have 125 yards, 2 touchdowns in the game today against the Titans. And then other halfback, I always would say LaShawn McCoy is always a solid pick. I feel like he'll have a decent game against the Panthers, at least 100 yards and a touchdown against the Panthers. He could do more out of the backfield, but I feel like he's a solid 100 yards and a touchdown almost every week. LaShawn McCoy is always solid back when he's healthy. Now I do think he got injured last week, so I will throw that out there. I think he has some type of wrist injury or something like that potentially, so he may be a little less productive, but he's a go for this week, so I feel like he could be effective. Wide receiver, I'm gonna say, gosh, I want to say, jeez. I want to say Demaryius Thomas. I don't think he had like a huge game last week, but I feel like Demaryius Thomas could have a good game this week against Dallas. He's a big dude, so he can make plays if he's given the opportunity. Demaryius Thomas would be in there. I'd also say, Julio Jones could probably be in for a big week as well. I mean, of course, any of the Raiders receivers, I would think, Amari Cooper, Crabtree had a great week last week. So I could see either Crabtree or Amari Cooper having, a great week this week as well. And then for defense, like I said, I feel like Cincinnati may have one of the highest scoring defenses this week. But the only other defense I feel like has the opportunity, honestly, I feel like it could be the Raiders defense. The Raiders defense could also have, one of the highest scoring defenses this week as well.
Yeah. Right now, projections have Seattle as having that defense with 41.5 points.
Yeah, of course they do, but I still feel like that's personally. I feel like that's almost like a trap game for Seattle because they didn't do that well against Green Bay, and so I feel like 49ers, given the tough time they gave to Carolina last week, I feel like has a better offense than Seattle. I feel like Seattle is going to be in for a tough time this week. Well, no, Michael. So the reason why I suspect that Fournette would get 100 yards is because Fournette had 100 yards against the Texans defense. So, and it's not the same. The Texans defense is I would say that's more difficult than the Titans defense. That's more. I think they're ranked higher than the Titans defense overall. So I feel like if Fournette could get 100 yards against them, I feel like this week he'd get 125 and 2 touchdowns against Tennessee. So those are my predictions for fantasy players of the week this week.
All right.
So that puts us at about like 10 minutes left. So I mean, I guess if Michael says wide receiver should be Stephon Diggs.
No.
Michael, I don't know. Sam Bradford is out, right? So Let's think about that again. If you didn't know that, now you know. So now do you still think it's Stephon Diggs? Shut up, Michael. Shut up. You want to be a mod? And that's what you have to say? But anyway, so so yeah, if there's any questions, If there's any questions that anyone has, if you want any potential fantasy advice, I guess if you have certain players, you can't decide who to start, who to sit. If you have any questions you want to ask, be sure to ask those now. If not, then I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up early if there's no other questions.
Yeah, I can't.
But I would like to say, shut up, Cam. So I would like to say though, who's my RB of the week? I said it would be either. I look at Fournette having potentially a very productive game. I feel like Marshawn Lynch could have a very productive game, and I feel like LaShawn McCoy is also a solid pick at halfback. But what I was going to say is that, we've had a few people express interest in participating with our weekly podcast. If you would like to be included in the podcast, again, it is early on, so that's kind of why we've been reluctant to bring people in right now. QB of the week, I mentioned Derek Carr. Derek Carr, I think, would be my number one choice.
And I said Drew Brees would be my number one choice.
And I felt like Simeon Preston mentions Brees. I mentioned Simeon as a low-key, potential sleeper QB.
Yeah.
But, so we've been reluctant about, bringing people in because it's kind of early on in the podcast. I think next week we would be in a better position to potentially bring someone in. But if you want to be included in the podcast, certainly there's going to be some ground rules you need to follow because, again, it is about being serious and having actual input into the game. But you need to send me a PM, myself or Preston. Send us a PM and express why you think you should be included in the podcast. What specific contribution do you think you would really have to the podcast? If it's one game that you want to be included for, that's fine. We don't necessarily want to split up everything that we do into threes. That would make for an extremely long podcast with a lot of different opinions. But DM, PM, it's the same difference. Direct message, private message, it's all the same thing. So we're not going to split up the entire podcast into 3 different people or anything like that. But I think we'd be willing if you want to come in for a particular segment and talk about a specific game. That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that makes the most sense. But people who come in as guests would not be here for the entire duration and have feedback into the entire duration of the podcast. Just a specific segment. Or a specific game. So again, be sure to PM or DM us and tell us, which game you're interested in for next week, preview wise, and what you think you would contribute to that game.
All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good one. Michael said, "Who's your tight end of the week?" Mine is Greg Olsen.
Oh. Yeah, he said Olsen. My tight end of the week. That's a tough one. If I look at the games, gosh, man, that's tough. That's a tough one. I mean, I feel like, you know what, Hooper from the Falcons. I feel like Hooper from the Falcons would be a good choice. He had a solid game last week, so Hooper from the Falcons would be my number one choice. Steelers, potentially you go with Jesse James. Jesse James could be another one. He had 2 touchdowns last week against the Browns. Again, if the Vikings employ the same defense against the Steelers and they keep everything in front of them, Jesse James might be the go-to guy again for Ben.
Yeah. I was going to say Kyle Rudolph until Sam Bradford got taken out. So he was going to be my number one. Was going to be Rudolph from Minnesota, but since Sam Bradford out, it's going to be
Hooper trash. What are you talking about, Michael? You're so dumb, dude. You're so dumb, man. You're terrible. You have no. There's no constructive criticism in that, Michael.
Said everybody's trash. Rudolph trash. Michael. All right. Well, Pittsburgh and Kansas City is about to start, so I'm gonna go ahead and head out. Yeah, Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Dumpster fire free. All right. So All right, yeah. So thanks, guys. We have no questions, so I think we're gonna start. We're gonna end the stream here, guys. So you got 5 minutes before the Sunday games start, dude. So hopefully everyone enjoys the games this week. I look forward to us being able to come back next week and review these games. Again, we'll be past the rust of week 1. Teams will still be trying to get in gear before we get into the the main part of the season. So hope everyone enjoyed the podcast this week, guys. Again, if you have any feedback you'd like to provide constructive feedback via YouTube comments, or you want to hit us up in Discord, go ahead and do that. And again, if you want to be involved, be sure to PM or DM us, and we'll find a way to get you in. All right, guys. So see you guys later. Take care, guys.